In the history of war, ports have always been as important as battlefields because logistics, not soldiers alone, keep armies fighting. Putin understood this better than most leaders, which is why Russia spent weeks destroying and capturing Mariupol in 2022. The objective was not only symbolic. Mariupol port was the largest logistics hub on the Sea of Azov, a vital artery supporting Crimea and Russia's southern front, while also serving as a gateway for exporting grain, coal, and metal from occupied Ukrainian territories. By taking the port, Russia believed it had secured the logistical backbone of its southern campaign. On the night of June 10th, Ukraine challenged that assumption with a coordinated drone operation. The most remarkable detail was the force behind it, the Azov Brigade. The same unit that defended Mariupol for 82 days in 2022 and endured the siege of Azovstal returned 4 years later with a very different method of warfare. Working alongside Ukraine's Security Service Special Operations Center, Alpha, and the Unmanned Systems Forces, Azov participated in a carefully planned strike using long-range kamikaze drones and FPV systems. Flying at low altitude and using autonomous navigation, the drones penetrated Russian defenses and overwhelmed the air defense systems protecting Mariupol. Once through, they targeted the port's critical infrastructure: electrical distribution stations, transformers, radar systems, surveillance equipment, repair facilities, the control tower, and fuel depots were struck. Earlier attacks had already damaged much of the fuel storage network, and this operation finished the job. The attack also targeted the cargo vessel Lady Augusta, a ship linked to Russia's sanctioned Shadow Fleet that had been used to transport resources from occupied territories to international markets. Official sources described the port's operating capacity as significantly restricted, while Ukrainian sources declared that Mariupol port was no longer operational. The reason is simple. Ukraine did not disable a single system. It struck multiple critical systems simultaneously. Without electricity, cranes and loading equipment cannot function. Without radar, ships cannot safely enter the harbor. Without repair facilities, damaged vessels can disrupt operations. Without fuel storage, ships cannot move efficiently. When all these systems fail together, a port effectively stops functioning. The damage also presents a major repair challenge. Restoring electrical infrastructure alone can take months, and repairing facilities under constant drone threat creates additional difficulties. This matters because Mariupol became an important part of Russia's logistics network after the occupation. With approximately 200,000 Russian troops deployed across southern Ukraine, supply requirements are enormous. The R-280 land corridor has already been placed under increasing Ukrainian drone pressure, reducing its effectiveness. Mariupol port was intended to ease that burden by providing an alternative supply route from the sea. The strike was not limited to the port. During the same night, Ukraine also targeted an ammunition depot belonging to Russia's 51st Combined Arms Army. Together, these attacks reduced Russian resupply capacity across the southern front. The economic impact may be equally significant. Mariupol has served as a major export point for resources taken from occupied territories, generating revenue that supports Russia's war effort. As long as the port remains impaired, those economic benefits are reduced. Politically, the strike carries symbolic weight. Mariupol was presented by the Kremlin as one of the greatest achievements of the 2022 invasion. The image of a secured and fully controlled Mariupol became an important part of Russia's domestic narrative. The fact that a drone operation could severely disrupt the port challenges that perception and raises questions about the security of other occupied territories. The consequences also extend to Crimea. Russian forces stationed on the peninsula have seen several logistics routes disrupted over time, including bridges, ferry connections, and transportation corridors. Mariupol port became one of the remaining alternatives for supporting operations through the Sea of Azov. If the port remains offline, supply options become increasingly limited. What makes the story particularly striking is the role of Azov. The same force that fought in Mariupol in 2022 has now returned through drone warfare. This reflects a broader transformation in Ukraine's strategy. Rather than relying solely on major frontline battles, Ukraine has increasingly focused on targeting logistics infrastructure deep behind enemy lines. Refineries, fuel depots, bridges, rail hubs, ports, and military facilities have all become targets in a strategy designed to weaken the systems that sustain military operation. This approach combines deep strikes, pressure on maritime routes, and disruption of land corridors. The objective is not necessarily to achieve victory through a single decisive battle, but to gradually make key Russian positions more difficult and costly to maintain. Mariupol represents one of the clearest examples of that strategy in action. However, this does not mean Russia is unable to adapt. Throughout the war, Russian forces have repeatedly found temporary solutions to logistics problems. Damaged infrastructure can be repaired, alternative routes can be established, and some supplies can be moved through air transport. Yet these solutions have limitations. Air resupply, for example, cannot efficiently support the daily needs of large military formations. Allies may provide equipment, components, ammunition, and technology, but they cannot directly solve the challenge of rebuilding infrastructure under persistent drone attack. Perhaps the most important lesson of the war is that repaired infrastructure often becomes a target again. Bridges, fuel depots, and logistics hubs that are restored can be struck repeatedly. This creates a cost imbalance where defenders spend large amounts on repairs, while attackers can disable the same facilities with comparatively inexpensive drones. In many ways, Mariupol reflects the broader evolution of modern warfare. Russia captured the city and its port through weeks of conventional combat and destruction in 2022. 4 years later, Ukraine demonstrated that a few dozen drones could significantly disrupt the same logistics hub within hours. The story is not only about Mariupol, it is about how technology is changing warfare and how critical logistics infrastructure has become increasingly vulnerable. Putin understood that ports are the heart of logistics. The challenge today is that those logistics networks are now within range of modern drone warfare.